Most people think sales are sleazy, but in reality, people just don't understand that you're helping the patient make a decision. It's irrelevant if they work with you or not.
This is Dr. Ashdin Billimoria, a managing partner at Strive to Move, the practice I founded. I wanted to talk to him today about selling in your practice and why thinking systematically about how you position yourself is the key to getting more new patients to commit. We also talk through the importance of having a sales system, Ashdin's journey in leadership, and what prospective patients really mean when they don't sign up with you. If you're new to the podcast, every episode we share the stories of chiros who are learning how to build their businesses and, along the way, learning the lessons they won't teach you in chiro school. If you want the kind of help I give out on today's podcast, click the link in the show notes to book a call with our team. It's a simple, no pressure, no obligation conversation to help you figure out the next right steps. And if anything you hear today is useful to your practice, please like and follow wherever you get your podcasts, or even leave a review. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Dr. Justin Rabinowitz, and this is Business School for the Rehab Chiropractor. So, Ashdin, since we spoke last July, you were sort of still getting going in the managing partnership of becoming an effective owner of Strive to Move from an associate, and a lot has changed in the growth of the business since then. What surprised you in growth?
I think what surprised me most was about, what it actually takes to lead a team first and foremost. I had to, going from Q3 into Q4, personally, I had to do a better job of stepping into more of a leadership role as opposed more to a coaching role. And that was a little uncomfortable for me because we tend to gravitate more towards what we're comfortable. And in order to actually push the business forward, we have to be okay with the uncomfortable. And so I think more importantly, stepping into that leadership role, specifically with Jamie, our SDR, and, holding her more accountable to the KPIs that we set and the standards that we set, that was a big step for me, especially jumping into the managing partner role. And, where the business is now, we are bringing on a new BDR next week, Gabby, which is really exciting. We are in the process of interviewing another chiro. And so the team is getting a lot bigger. And I think as we grow more, it's just making sure that the standards that we set in place continue to be upheld.
And so with that, what worries you the most currently with the business?
It's interesting because I think about that and it's I've never really had time to think about that question, but obviously it's now that we have a team, people are depending upon us more for their livelihood, right? As opposed to it used to just be Kaylee and myself and you. And now it's we have a full team depending upon us. Once we have a new chiro in the office, making sure their schedule's full, but also are they converting as well to, push money into the business. And so it's not only on us now, it's we have a team to help and we have to make sure we are putting them in the right positions to succeed. And so that's what keeps me up. It's I'm really good at sales, but now I want the next person to be really good at sales. And so I can't do everything.
So much so that I've actually dedicated the last period of time to creating a leadership course for my members to take because it was something that they needed and I needed. And they say in business, every problem creates a new problem. Well, we've really done an unbelievable job of being able to grow this community to now where they're building their own teams, and leadership is something that absolutely can be systematic and taught, which has forced me to go back to the drawing board to figure out how to teach it. And I've created a leadership system now, which I can now teach to people, which allows them to not only create the culture that they want, but then figure out the KPIs and standards required to then figure out how to communicate that and then how to duplicate it and put it into the business. And so in this system, I believe it can be taught. In fact, if it can't be taught, then the business will get stuck. So it is something absolutely that can be taught, but it needs to be put in a systematic way. And that has been the journey that I'm on. You mentioned Jamie at the SDR on the phone, and that was something that we really worked on 12 months ago and had what we called our sales boot camp process. And now we evolved into the next stage of what happens once the patient walks into the clinic. So we do a good job on the phone, but now we know that many of the people in Rehab Chiro and even in our own clinic, it's one thing to get them in the door, but the next step is to get them to become a patient. And so our process, we do that discovery visit, we do an evaluation before we take anyone as a patient. So from your perspective, why do you think that discovery visits and evaluations break down right when the patient has to make the decision?
Well, I think you have to take a step back because it doesn't actually, yes, it breaks down at the decision point, but if you know sales, you know our system, it actually breaks down before that. Because if we're going into a discovery visit and we're unclear on the objection, we could spend 45 minutes going through a whole discovery visit with the wrong objection. And then when it gets right to the decision point, they're going to give you an obstacle. And I can talk about that more, like spouse, time, cost. But it doesn't come down to the obstacle. It comes down to that we just spent 45 minutes picking the wrong objection.
So you mentioned the obstacle versus objection, and just to give the audience some context, to put it in doctor terms, the obstacle is the pain that they're having. The objection is the root cause. So let's say they come in with back pain, that would be the obstacle, but the root cause would be that they have a hip issue type of thing. And so again, to give it one step further with context, it's what they say versus what's actually true.
Correct.
And what you're talking about is getting to what is actually true.
Yeah.
So when a patient says, I have to think about it, or I have to talk to my spouse, what would you say, like an amateur clinician, what would they think is happening?
Yeah, they're going to accept it at face value, right? They're going to say, oh, yep, totally understand. When can I follow up with you?
Right.
And you know what's going to happen? You're never going to see them again. They're never coming back.
So talk me through that. Let's go deeper into that. What's actually happening, and what have you learned over your journey of figuring out when that happened? Because it has happened to us and still does.
Yeah, it still happens to us. And, Kaylee and I are at a point now when we know we get those obstacles, we can talk about how to address them, but more often than not, they're not coming back. And so what has to happen before that point to make sure, A, we don't get that obstacle? And so when they are giving you a time obstacle, what you want to do is you want to separate the time obstacle from the actual next step. Like, forget about, like, if you want to think about it, understand that. Is this something you even want to do? Do you even want to move forward to the next step? Because if they don't even want to move forward to the next step, the obstacle's irrelevant. The easy example would be spouse. Like, it's so easy for them to say, I need to go talk to my spouse because that's what's comfortable. They're not going to say, I don't know how you can help me. I don't know how this is different. I'm so unsure of what you actually do. And so when you think about the obstacle, it's, again, what they say because they're comfortable with it. They don't know how to articulate the cost of an action. They don't understand how to say, well, I don't know how you're different from the chiro down the street. Why would I come back? And so the obstacle is just very easy for them to answer with because it's comfortable.
This is so important to understand, and I'm sure plenty of you have experienced this obstacle before. Prospective clients won't always tell you exactly why they won't sign up for a treatment plan, and to be honest, it's up to you to find the reasons behind why they're objecting. And if this is something that you struggle with, head to the link in the show notes. We have a whole team that would be happy to help you.
The sale starts at no, right? So in the moment, you want to just take a step back and be like, okay, they're saying no, now let's figure that out. And so we talk about isolating the obstacle, right? So let's say spouse, hey, independent of what your spouse has to say, do you even want to move forward with the next step? Okay. And then you start to play the game with them. You go back and forth. They say, yeah, but I just want to talk to my spouse. It's like, yep, totally understand you want to talk to your spouse. If it's okay if I ask, what are you going to say to your spouse? Right. And their answer really just, now you have to start listening to what they're going to say. Because if they tell they're going to go home and tell their spouse, this is the best thing, this is so different than my last experience at PT, they're going to help me reach back to XYZ, you're going to feel a little bit better about it. But if they just give you some wishy-washy answer around like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go home, this felt nice, it felt like PT again, well, you have some more work to do.
As I think about this and zoom out, we're so deep into our world and we understand why we're doing it and what we're doing. But for the listeners out there who, aren't in our world and aren't exposed to what we're doing and are clinicians, honestly, this feels like we're learning sales and we didn't go to school to do that. So I'm curious, how do you think about it and how did you overcome that thought? Because we both had it at some point in this process of that we had to learn it and commit to it.
Yeah. It was definitely back when we were in the Warren office, we sat down and had a conversation about, because I remember I was like, I told you, like, I don't really want to role play. Like, I don't want to practice. Right. And it came down to like, and he said, okay, that's fair. And then he used the example of Tom Brady watching film. And I was like, good point. And so then I started thinking, we started having more conversations around it. And it really just comes down to communication, right? Most people think sales are sleazy, but in reality, people just don't understand that you're helping the patient make a decision. It's irrelevant if they work with you or not. And that's what I think most people think of sales. They think, oh, so you're going to try to be sleazy to really try to convince them to work with you and you only. And that's the farthest from the truth. At the end of the day, when you can reshape the mindset around what sales actually is you're helping that patient in front of you make a decision, irrelevant if they work with you or not. And that's the best thing that you can do for them. Well, that changes your perception on it. And when I was able to make that mindset switch, and I should say when we were able to make that switch, it's an easier conversation around like sales, quote unquote.
So the next question is, why do most clinicians that you know, your colleagues, people that you hear from, people that you coach in our group, why do you think they struggle with that conversation when it comes to helping the client or the patient make the best decision for themselves?
Well, I think it first comes down to they don't have a system. They don't have a system in place to actually like have that. They don't know how to have that conversation, right? They enter that room and it's like, okay, you're going to do a discovery visit, and then you get an objection. But if you don't even know what the objection is, how are you going to push that conversation forward? So they don't have a system. And if they don't have a system, imagine when they start to bring a team member aboard and they're like, okay, go do this discovery visit. But if there's no system in place to just rinse and repeat, they're going to struggle.
So the importance of having a system for sales for me actually comes back to integrity, to be honest with you. One of the biggest challenges that I see in our community deep down when people hire or don't hire or hesitate to hire is because what happens if this person isn't going to be successful and then I have to get rid of them? Even more so, this becomes really relevant when we bring on chiros and PTs, because many times they uproot their lives. Think about my managing partners, Kaylee and Ashdin. Kaylee moved here from Minnesota, Ashdin from Florida. And so there's a lot of pressure on me that I felt that they're uprooting their lives. And quite frankly, if they can't sell properly or enough, we can't keep them. And that leads me back to having a system, because in order for me to look them in the eye and know that I've given them my absolute best, I have to be able to teach them something to know that I've done every single thing in my power to allow them to be successful. And without a very clear system in place, I don't feel that that's possible, which is why for me, not only if it's on the phone, but in the clinic, where I'm dedicating the rest of this year and next year to really creating this clinical sales system so that I can look the people in the eye in my community, but on my own team, to say, I've given you absolutely everything I got, and this is the best that we got, and now we can go execute on it. So it is something that I realized as soon as I started to bring people in and I had such a sense of responsibility for them that I had to do everything in my power to make them successful. And this is where the system came in, because if it just lived in my head, I knew that they wouldn't be able to replicate it. I want Ashdin to give me the first step to implementing a strong, coherent sales system.
Well, you could start with like the first step, which is the discovery call, and how to actually implement a discovery call. What are the questions you ask? Like, what are the follow-up questions? How to prescribe the next steps? That would all be within a system. And you would lay out the script, you would lay out the role play, and how to actually implement it. And then the same thing for the discovery visit, like how to actually go through a discovery visit from start to finish, and how to go through an eval start to finish, and then how to take someone through a treatment plan start to finish. And I think when you can put that into a system, and then you can break down key points within each step, and it's like, okay, if the patient presents, let's say they've been somewhere before, in our world we call that value for unique solution, what are the certain follow-up questions you need to ask? How do you actually going to connect the dots and communicate to them that how you're different and going to get them back to X outcome? And so you'd want to lay it out step by step by step. And that's how I'd build a system.
When we think about that, one thing, a false belief, is that it feels very complicated. And in fact, if your system is complicated, that means it isn't effective. And so that leads to overwhelming the patient, which you talk about a lot. Mm-hmm. And so you've mentioned to me that very often when you're working with clinicians that they overwhelm patients. Why do you think that happens?
Because it's comfortable for them.
Why? Because
they go back to what's comfortable, what they learned in school, exercise, clinical. And those are the two things. They talk exercise and clinical because they're comfortable there. But the problem with that is it's not emotional enough for the patient, because they don't understand. They don't understand that, nor do they care. They don't care about the anatomy. What they care about is A, that you understand them, B, you're listening to them, and C, that you're going to get them back to the outcome that you guys both agreed upon. That's what they care about.
So in terms of that, it's super common, and I think especially new clinicians, the mantra that I often have with any system is, how do we do less better? And actually, I don't know if you remember when we first started implementing this years ago, it was I'll never forget this one, the cop, right? The cop that came in, he had a neck problem, but it was in his shoulder, and it was like, what are we going to treat? And it was like, he's got a neck and a shoulder and an elbow and a back and all that. And I remember we just had a conversation about how do we focus on like one of these, but just go all in on that one, so he leaves with ultimate clarity on how to solve that one problem. Yeah. And so maybe give us a case study or an example of like a real patient that you would think of maybe Ashdin of 2019-20, how he would communicate with this type of injury, and now what it might look like? Like, what does simple actually mean when you and I both know, and all the people listening, they're like, yeah, but this person's got a trillion things going on.
Yeah, I think I'll go back to my patient, Kim. So Kim is a CrossFitter. She's a mom. She's a nurse, ER nurse. Her biggest thing is like she's coming in with hip pain. It's been a chronic issue. But she's also dealt with shoulder. She's also dealt with neck. And when she's come to see us, she was like, I have all these issues. And can you help me with that? And so old Ashdin would have been like, here's what we're going to do for the neck. Here's what we're going to do for the shoulder. Here's what we're going to do for the hip. And we can do that all within our treatment plan. But she's so confused because it's overwhelming her with all these problems. So now today what we teach is what's the one thing? What's the one thing that if we work on and you can invest your time, effort, energy, and money into would make this valuable for you? And so she said the hip. And I said, okay, so if we concentrate on the hip, we focus on the hip, and we get you back into, deadlifting with your community, that would be worth it for you. She said yes. And she became a patient. And so old Ashdin would have tried to fix everything. The new Ashdin, I guess you could say, lack of better terms, we're focusing on the one thing and then just going all in on that.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, a practice management software and EMR built to support you in the day-to-day work of running your business. If you're a health or wellness practitioner, you already know the care you provide starts well before your patient arrives and extends far beyond the treatment room. Jane is here to support every part of that experience. With online booking, your clients can book at a time that works for them. And with features like waitlist notifications, they'll even be able to grab last-minute openings when they pop up. It's an easy way to keep your schedule full while getting your patients the care they need. During your appointment, Jane's AI-powered documentation feature can help you thoughtfully take notes so you can stay present with the person in front of you. And after appointments, you can end your time together on a healing note, not a transactional one, by charging the card on file. So guys, when Jane reached out to me to become an ambassador for them, it was a no-brainer. In my community Slack channel, we have 140 Kairos PTs, US, Canada, and all over the world. And this is like the one piece of equipment software that consistently gets a 10 out of 10 rating. They talk about it all the time. They absolutely love it. And so when Jane reached out to me to help them and be an ambassador for their brand, it was an absolute no-brainer. And I am so excited to be able to work with them. To learn more about Jane, how they can support you and your patients, head to jane.app/demo. And one last thing. If you're ready to get started with Jane, you can use my code RehabChiro1MO for a 1-month grace period on your new account. What happens in a situation, and I'd be curious if it has happened, where you say, all right, you have 3 things, but if you can only pick one, and the patient says, well, I don't want to just fix one. I came here to fix all 3. Has that ever happened?
Yeah, that's happened before.
And in that case, will they become a patient, or is it something where the expectations aren't in alignment and it might be a good thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think this is where you speak with confidence and you speak with tone and like, look, and you empathize with them because you understand they have all these problems and they want to solve every single one of them. But this is where you empathize and you tell them, look, like, I totally understand that you have all these issues. Here's exactly where I'm confident that I know I can help you and how we're going to get there. And then you can have an honest conversation. And if that doesn't sound like worth your time, effort, energy, and money, that's okay. But here's what I think you should do. And I'm okay if they say no, which is, again, you talk about 3-4 years ago, I wouldn't have been okay with that. Mm-hmm. Now I know we're not for everyone, and that's okay. And I understand we can't help everyone. And I'm okay if people say no, just as long as they have a plan on what to do if they don't work here.
How often, I'm going to do a follow-up question to this, but just give me a percentage and then we'll get in more context. How often does someone who you say, I can help you, and you start a plan of care with, like, they get no better at all and they're like pissed of the result? Like, how often does that happen of like, it's a failure?
Confidently, 0. Very confident, 0.
Dive into that, because that seems unrealistic.
Yeah, it comes down to expectations. You taught me this early on, and I was able to teach this to Kaylee early on. It's like, we will not guarantee you anything, right? And again, so the conversation, will you guarantee I can get out of back pain? No, I will not. But here is what I'm absolutely confident if we start to address, and then you can go into their limitations. If we start to address these issues here, you are going to give yourself the absolute best shot at reaching your goal. And here's what I know we can improve on. And when you can have that conversation around it, and you not guarantee them anything, they're going, in their mind, they're like, okay, I know I'm not guaranteed to get out of back pain, but I know he said if I can improve my hip range of motion, I can stay in the gym, and it's going to give myself the absolute best shot at getting better. Then I'm okay with that.
I think it's unbelievably important to not guarantee anything to prospective patients, because on an ethical level, it's lying. And on a more practical level, in our practice acts in the different states and provinces, you usually can't. And quite frankly, if I were a patient or my family was going to a doctor that was guaranteeing specific results of care, I would tell them to run and run fast. There's a joke out there for doctors. They say they call it practice for a reason. But the truth is there's so many factors that can happen when a patient enters in care, and we never can guarantee them an outcome. But within their treatment plan, within some of the movements and objective measures that we can guarantee that we're going to put them through a correct process, and we can look them in the eye and tell them all of the things that we are confident we can do. But to guarantee them they're going to be able to do X, Y, and Z, not only do I think it's unethical, but I think it's actually decreases the likelihood that you can get a sale, because it puts so much pressure and people are naturally skeptical. And when you guarantee things to them, they're going to look at you and think you're absolutely crazy. And so if people are out there, then they're guaranteeing people to get out of pain or to get an outcome. I would say you're not only are you doing something ethically wrong, but you're probably outside your scope of practice, to be honest with you. So one of the questions we often get is you say on the first session, you're saying you need 15 sessions and you're at session 9 and we're not getting close to what we talked about. Like, how do you communicate that to people?
If you know they're not getting better, right? If you know we're not reaching the goal, you're not going to wait until more than halfway through their plan, right? You're going to have that conversation early on. As you dive more into this, you're going to be able to tell early on whether a patient is improving. And you're laying down the realistic expectations on what you should be able to see, set if you're doing a 15 session plan, like 3 sessions in, 6 sessions in, like you can start to realistically see what you should expect at this point. And if they're not meeting those baselines, you're going to have a conversation with them. We talk about the term chief reminding officer, right? We're constantly reminding the patient, like, okay, here's where you're at, here's where you were, and here's where you're at now. And even though progress might seem slow, I want you to see how far you actually have come.
What you just said is massively important, because I played the position of saying, well, what happens if they aren't getting better? And what you've said to me multiple times of, well, many times they walk in thinking they're not getting better, and I have to reframe and remind them of where they've come to. So give us a specific example about that, because there's someone listening that's like, oop, that's the piece I've been missing.
Yeah, and I also think going back to define better, right? What does it actually look like? And so patients, this is, again, the importance of taking videos and pictures, because our patients, they can't feel sometimes. Like I have a patient, he's a golfer, Frank. Frank's an interesting character. And Frank's like, I feel like I'm not getting better. It's like, okay, Frank, let's have this conversation. What do you mean? He's like, well, I played 9 holes and my back tightened up. Okay. I was like, okay, but were you able to get through the full round? He said, yes. I was like, Frank, when you saw me 9 weeks ago, you weren't even able to play a full round. He's like, that's true. He's like, I still feel like I'm tight. Okay, well, let's actually see, right? Difference between feel versus real. And so I took a baseline picture of Frank at a standing rotation. He had full rotation. You could see his shoulder blades. When he came in, he couldn't even rotate. I was like, look at the difference. So even though you still feel tight, objectively, you are improving.
Where do you think that comes from? Where do you think that comes from the patient? Because sometimes there are people in this world, we all know them. It happens in my business with coaching people. It happens in the clinic that, like, honestly, their biggest goal is to prove that you can't help them. And that's an amazing mindset of they waste so much energy on that. But like, sounds like this guy, Frank, is not that guy.
Yeah, this is where, you understand the patient's journey. We know where most of our patients come from. We know where the last stop for majority or 95% of our patients, we're the last stop.
Right.
And so that's rooted in skepticism. They're skeptical. They're so afraid of making a bad decision. Like any way for them to justify this isn't working, they're going to try to bring up. Right. And so that is why it's so important. And I communicate with the people in the group. It's so important that you are communicating at each session, like their progress. You are their biggest cheerleader. And the more that you can communicate to them, the better that they're going to leave here walking out of each session knowing that they're getting better.
I liked what you said about being their biggest cheerleader. And when I graduated school, I worked as an associate. And I remember a distinct conversation and looking back on that conversation, when someone asks a question like, do you take my insurance? Most clinicians think of that as an objection. How would you reframe that for someone that's listening, thinking like, oh, if they ask that, it's over?
It's a gotcha question because they are fact-finding, right? It's so, again, talk about the switch. We used to we don't want the insurance questions. Remember that? We was like, we don't want the insurance questions. Now we're fine with them. We want them because we call them I'll tell you what I think and then I'll tell you how to attack it. We term it a buying question. It's a normal question to ask now. It's just a normal question for a patient. Do you take my insurance? They're trying to fact gather data. Now, the way you want to address it is that you want to understand, like, that is not why they're going to say no. They're not going to say no because of insurance. They're not going to actually tell you no. They're not going to tell you that this looks the same as PT. They're not going to tell you that this is not bad enough right now. I'm going to wait to solve this. They're going to throw an insurance or cost obstacle. And so you have to do a job of trying to separate the two between the obstacle and how to move them forward to the next step.
Right. Okay. Keep going, because you said there was 2 parts to this.
So discovery call, DV, if you get that on the eval, you're done. So I don't even want to talk about the eval, because if you get that at the end of the eval, it's like they're not moving forward. So the purpose of the discovery call, right? You want to focus on getting them to the next step. People will say, oh, well, does the insurance cover the plan? It's like, we're not there yet. Purpose is from the phone calls to get them to the next step. So if we get that onto the discovery call, we're not going to tell them, okay, independent of insurance, would you even want to work with us? It's not a great question there, because they have no idea what you do. So, hey, that's a great question. Like I mentioned on the phone, we're out of network with insurance. However, the first step is the free discovery visit, so that we can make sure that we can absolutely help you, or even open to coming in for that session. That's it. You just want to move them along. Discovery visit. Hey, totally understand you have some insurance concerns. Hey, is it okay if I ask, putting insurance aside, is the evaluation treatment session something you even want to do? Yeah, I want to do the eval, but I'm not sure about the plan. Okay, well, tell me about that. What's your hesitation of moving forward with the plan if I present one? And they tell you, and then it's like, oh, it's just cost. It's expensive. Want to use my insurance. Totally understand. Redirect them back to one step, which is the eval. And so we used to think of just one way, but now you have to almost separate it by each step.
Right.
And I know it might seem complicated, but if you just look at it on the surface, like discovery call, get them to the DV. DV, get them to the eval.
Yeah.
Eval, plan of care. That's it.
So last question I want to ask you, which is going to be a reality for you very soon.
Okay.
You bring in another clinician
next
week into your practice. If you had to sum up in one sentence on what you think they'll struggle with the most, what would it be?
Like overall, or like steps, just in general?
Within let's go very specific, when a patient walks in the door for a discovery visit through saying yes to a plan, if I said, Ashdin, what's the one thing you've got to focus them on to get them to the point of success?
Clarity. Being able to...
Who?
Like, the patient needs clarity. Like, they don't have clarity on why they're here or what they're working towards. They're going to be confused, and confused buyers don't buy.
If you're listening to this and you're looking for guidance on how you can give more clarity to your patients, go to the link in the show notes and talk to our team. We have a massive community of people just like you who have taken their practice to the next level. So send us a message if you're interested in doing that. I'm Dr. Justin Rabinowitz, and this has been Business School for the Rehab Chiropractor. Like, subscribe, and click the follow wherever you get your podcasts.